Even the biggest superstars can have a fall from grace, a huge dip in their sales and chart performance. But one album can flip everything and become the reason for their comeback. In this video, we'll look at 8 albums that ended flop eras. Confessions on the Dance Floor by Madonna. Madonna's Confessions on the Dance Floor was a return to form, following the failure of American Life, which many fans and critics found preachy and out of touch. She was at one of her most uncertain points in her career. American Life was her lowest-selling studio album in the US at the time, with 241,000 copies sold in its first week. Despite a chart-topping debut, it plummeted quickly and became her first major commercial disappointment in years. The singles even failed to crack the top 30 of the Billboard Hot 100. It was a low point in Madonna's career. Then she pivoted with Confessions on the Dance Floor. She got back to the pure pop fun that made her an icon. She crafted an album that played like one continuous club set, embracing electronic music. The lead single Hung Up was a global phenomenon, sampling ABBA's Gimme Gimme Gimme. It reached number 1 in 41 countries including the UK, and peaked at number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100, making it her biggest hit in years. The album sold around 4 million copies worldwide during its first week of release and brought Madonna back to the top. Critically, Confessions was a breath of fresh air. It received a Metacritic score of 79 out of 100, with many calling it her best album since Ray of Light. Madonna reasserted her dominance in pop, and the album didn't just end a flop era, it gave her new life. Beyonce by Beyonce. After the commercial disappointment of 2011's 4, Beyonce found herself in a strange place. While the album was beloved by fans, it was far from a blockbuster. Singles like Run the World Girls and Best Thing I Never Had failed to dominate radio in the way her previous hits did. 4 debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and sold 310,000 copies in its first week, but it became a disappointment. Then whispers began to grow that Beyonce had peaked. That all changed on December 13, 2013, when she surprise dropped her 5th studio album, Beyonce, on iTunes with zero promotion. The self-titled project wasn't just a return to form, it was a cultural reset. In its first 3 days, the album sold 828,000 copies worldwide, including 617,000 in the US alone, instantly debuting at number 1 on the Billboard 200. It was a bold experiment, a visual album with no lead single and no traditional rollout. Tracks like Drunken Love, Partition, and Flawless became massive cultural moments, and suddenly, Beyonce wasn't just back, she had reinvented the rules of album releases. It was also loved by critics, with a Metacritic score of 85 out of 100. It made every major publication's Album of the Year list. The album also earned 5 Grammy nominations and marked the beginning of her most experimental period, leading directly to Lemonade, Coachella Homecoming, and Renaissance. More than just a comeback, she turned what looked like a fading era into a golden renaissance, re-establishing herself as a pop icon. Anti by Rihanna. Before Anti, Rihanna was caught in a cycle. From 2009 to 2012, she released an album nearly every year, churning out hit after hit. Her 2012 album Unapologetic was successful, with massive singles like Diamonds and Stay. After that, she took a break, leading many to wonder if she was burning out. Then came her flop era, when she was trying to find the sound for her next album. She swung and missed a couple of times, when singles like Bitch Better Have My Money and American Oxygen didn't quite hit. Then came Anti, an album that flipped everything upside down. Released in January 2016, after a bumpy rollout, it was a game changer. It dropped exclusively on Tidal at first, and because of that, RIAA certified it platinum within 2 days, but critics questioned the numbers. However, once the dust settled, Anti found its footing, and then continued to grow. The album debuted at number 27 due to the Tidal exclusivity, but shot to number 1 the following week. It has spent a massive 468 weeks on the Billboard 200, becoming her longest charting album ever, and worked with Drake, became a 9-week number 1 smash. Artistically, Anti was Rihanna's declaration of independence. She was making the music she wanted to make. It is now considered her magnum opus, and she hasn't released a studio album since. Purpose by Justin Bieber. By 2014, Justin Bieber was in serious trouble, not just with the law, but with his career. Following the underperformance of his 2013 album Journals, a digital-only release that failed to chart on the Billboard 200 at all. Public perception of Bieber had taken a nosedive, ruining his public image. Even believers were starting to question if he could ever rebound from the mess. Enter Purpose, released on November 2015, and changed everything. The album debuted at number 1 of the Billboard 200, selling 649,000 copies in its first week, marking Bieber's strongest sales week to date. But beyond the numbers, Purpose redefined him musically. He experimented with different sounds, resulting in bangers like Where Are You Now, What Do You Mean, Love Yourself, and Sorry, all of which reached the top 5 of the Billboard Hot 100. What Do You Mean becoming his first number 1 single in the US. Purpose wasn't just a chart success, it was a rehabilitation of his image. The album even earned him Grammy nominations, including Album of the Year. More importantly, it changed how people talked about Justin Bieber. Purpose pulled off one of the biggest comebacks of all time. Love by Jennifer Lopez. Before Love, Jennifer Lopez's music career was on life support. Her previous 2 albums, 2005's Rebirth and 2007's Brave, were commercial disappointments. Brave in particular was a flop, debuting at just number 12 on the Billboard 200, selling only 52,000 copies in its first week, a huge drop from the multi-platinum success of her early career. Singles like Do It Well and Hold It Don't Drop It failed to resonate, with her focus shifting towards acting, television, and fashion. Many assumed her pop star days were over. Then she dropped Love in 2011. The album rollout began with On the Floor featuring Pitbull, a dance pop banger that sounded nothing like anything she had done before, and it worked. The song exploded globally, hitting number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and becoming one of the best-selling singles of the early 2010s. It marked J-Lo's first top 10 hit in 8 years. The video has racked up 2.5 billion views on YouTube to date, and suddenly, after the success of the song, J-Lo was everywhere again. The album itself debuted at number 5 on the Billboard 200, her highest position since 2005, and was certified gold in the US. The project didn't hit the multi-platinum heights of her early 2000s dominance, but its impact was undeniable. Singles like Into You continued the momentum, but the album showed one thing: Jennifer Lopez was no longer a punchline. She was a hitmaker again. Her American Idol stint only boosted the comeback further, reintroducing her to a younger generation, and her flop era was over for some time. A Star Is Born by Lady Gaga. Before A Star Is Born, Lady Gaga was in a weird place. Her 2016 album Joanne marked a commercial calm down after the heights of the fame in Born This Way. Even though it hit number 1 on the Billboard 200, it quickly slid off the charts, and its lead single Perfect Illusion peaked at a disappointing number 15. Gaga was still respected, but her chart dominance had faded, and there was a sense that she was struggling to make an impact. She managed to headline the Super Bowl halftime show, but her fans were wondering how new music from her would do. She was also making her pivot into acting around that time. Then came A Star Is Born, released in October 2018 alongside the film. The soundtrack debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200, selling 231,000 units in its first week. The lead single Shallow became a cultural phenomenon, hitting number 1 in the US and winning the Academy Award for Best Original Song. It ended the year as one of the most popular songs and went on to be certified 4 times platinum in the US. It has now accumulated 2.7 billion streams on Spotify. The success of A Star Is Born didn't just revive Gaga's career, it gave it new life. No longer was she boxed into the electropop sound. She was a triple threat: singer, songwriter, and actress. It opened doors for a more grounded phase in her career and started a new chapter in her story. Flower Boy by Tyler the Creator. Tyler the Creator just keeps growing with each album, coming into prominence in the late 2000s as the leader of Odd Future. He was a disruptor in hip-hop with his shock value. His early albums like Goblin in 2011 and Wolf in 2013 polarized listeners. Cherry Bomb especially took a beating. While it debuted at number 4 on the Billboard 200, critics hated it for its all-over-the-place production and abrasive style. Even Tyler himself later admitted he wasn't happy with how it sounded. For years, he was seen more as a provocateur than a serious artist. Enter Flower Boy, officially titled Scumfuck Flower Boy, released in July 2017. It was a creative and emotional leap, dishing the irony and shock for sincerity and vulnerability. It debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200 moving 106,000 units in its first week. It was widely praised as Tyler's most cohesive and mature work. Singles like See You Again and 911 Mr. Lonely marked a shift towards neo-soul and jazzy production and have become some of the biggest songs of his career. See You Again has now accumulated 2.3 billion streams on Spotify. The album was a huge pivot in his career. Flower Boy was nominated for Best Rap Album at the 2018 Grammy Awards and has since been certified gold by the RIAA. More importantly, it rebranded Tyler as an artist with depth and longevity. He was no longer the edgy teenager. He was now seen as one of rap's most original and visionary voices. The album laid the foundation for future masterpieces like Igor and Call Me If You Get Lost, both of which won the Rap Album of the Year at the Grammys. The Emancipation of Mimi by Mariah Carey. By the early 2000s, Mariah Carey's career was teetering on the edge of collapse. After a decade of dominance in the 90s, she faced a brutal downturn starting from 2001's Glitter, a soundtrack album tied to her critically hated film of the same name. It was an absolute flop. Things didn't improve with 2002's Charm Bracelet, which debuted on number 3, but suffered from weak sales, and a general sense that Mariah had lost her hit-making magic seemed to be taken over. For someone who had scored 15 number-1 hits in less than a decade, her presence on the charts was beginning to fade. Then came the Emancipation of Mimi, a huge comeback that not only brought Mariah back to the mainstream conversation, but re-established her as a commercial force. Released in April 2005, the album debuted on number 1 on the Billboard 200, with 404,000 copies sold in its first week, her best opening at the time, led by the monster single We Belong Together, which spent 14 weeks on number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. The album became a phenomenon. We Belong Together was named Billboard Song of the Decade for the 2000s, and its success reignited Mariah's career. The album was certified 7 times platinum in the US and went on to sell over 10 million copies worldwide. The Emancipation of Mimi proved Mariah Carey could still dominate the charts and silence the critics on her own terms. Which albums that ended flop eras did I miss? Tell me in the comments below.